Global demand for energy continues to grow. At the same time, there's an urgent need for us to reduce our carbon emissions. Achieving both objectives will require innovative thinking. But where would that innovation come from, and how can it be nurtured? In this report, the Economist Intelligence Unit explores ways in which innovation in technology as well as policy can lead to a more sustainable future.
Innovation is something which you can't really make firm predictions about. Europe's bet, at least for 2020, is to look to renewables, look to nuclear for those countries who want it, but basically to try to control our own future rather than depend on others too much.
I think it's good to always have an idea of where we ultimately want to end up. And some people will argue that we should go down a nuclear route, some people would argue we should go down a sort of clean fossil fuel route. I firmly believe that where we need to get to ultimately is to have a solar economy in which all the energy that we use comes from solar sources. And there are some people that would scoff at the idea of that and saying, well, there's just not enough around. But actually, if you look at the amount of energy that comes into the Earth, we receive roughly 7,000 times as much energy every year as we use in energy from all forms.
There's been very few technologies that ever existed and lived without an economic or a business model to support them. And so I think we've got to spend time in this field in innovation in new materials, new forms of electronics, new use of natural substances like enzymes, bacteria.
Does the public accept these technologies? And you can find in every single country of the European Union one energy technology which they fiercely dislike, whether it's nuclear in Germany and Austria or onshore wind in the UK.
We've got to get connected thinking in our policy making and in our financial markets. And in the way we think about investments, instruments, and how we innovate as much on the business economics as we do in the other areas, which we tend to overlook until it's too late and then wonder why it fails and people can't afford it.
To continue to meet energy demand and break down some of the traditional barriers to innovation, governments will need to apply an intelligent and pragmatic mixture of policies and investment. How can they get the policy framework right for stimulating innovation and then putting innovation to work?
There are quite a few barriers to innovation at the moment. One is timescales. I think we're still used to thinking in very short-term timescales, and a lot of the innovative solutions that we come up with sometimes have a longer payback period. So they might be slightly more expensive on day one, but actually in 5 or 10 or 20 years' time, they really do start to recoup a lot of money.
We have to see whether those technologies can be developed, rolled out, and then gradually reach levels of costs which are competitive with conventional sources of energy. So the basis for a subsidy should be that it is to meet a market failure. A subsidy should be at the level which is necessary. It should be proportionate to the problem, and it should be limited in time.
I think there is a case for subsidies, particularly when you've got an established situation that has a lot of momentum to it and a lot of resistance to change. So we've got very accustomed to using fossil fuels to meet nearly all our needs, and that's unlikely to change quick enough unless we do have subsidies.
So smart legislation that continually evolves with new technology, really critical. Establishing of standards so that things interoperate. Always takes 10 years to get into a market after great innovation changed the world. And so we've got to get faster at standardization and interoperability, which means the collective industries have to start to think, my device doesn't just talk to the things that I'm producing, it's got to talk to everything.
Energy efficiency is a euphemism for lower revenue for utilities. And that's a fundamental problem. And really without smart policy, there's always going to be this inherent conflict of interest for a utility to really push customers to pay attention and really push them to try to eliminate that extra energy use that they do not need.
Developing new technologies will challenge the way we think about energy and how we use it, and central to that is changing the behavior of the consumer.
How do companies help us, the citizen, manage our energy production? And how do they help us produce? How do they help us understand the consequences of the things we're doing? And I think there's elements there stimulation of innovation, getting away from the old business models, a lot more outreach to industry, a lot more collaboration, and ultimately a much more intimate relationship with the guys they're ultimately trying to help, which is the consumer.
If you can imagine a future where if you invest in a distributed generation inside your home and you can sell that power back into the grid for potentially a profit, that can only have a really positive impact.
We're going to empower people to be able to take decisions on their energy use just as they do in other areas. So it's not just simply a given as it has been in the past.
Policymakers can actually change that. They can set up the policy so that if utilities help their consumers save money and reduce the energy, they can be compensated and incentivized in interesting ways.
We're going to have to look at our bills, look at our way of using energy in a much more conscious way than we do today.
And as consumer engagement goes up around energy use, we believe that a whole new wave of demand can start to materialize for new products. And as demand materializes, the market will happen and innovation will happen as well.
We've got to make better use of energy. It's so obvious. And it's the one way to avoid, in Europe, building hundreds and maybe thousands more power stations.
As we look forward, the shift is going to be driven by human aspiration. By building afresh or regenerating, we have an opportunity to go think very holistically, because if we don't, we're going to hell in a handbasket real fast.
People often ask me whether I feel optimistic or pessimistic about the future, and I actually think that both of those are a mistake, because they imply a kind of inevitability about the future. And what I think we need to do is to be really deliberate about what future we want for ourselves and then set about creating it.